Most people are taught that World War I ended on November 11th, 1918. The guns fell silent, treaties were signed, peace returned. But the argument of prolonging the agony is far more unsettling. The war did not end, it merely changed form. In its final chapters, the book shows that the Russian Revolution, the Versailles settlement, and the post-war blockade were not attempts to stabilize the world, but mechanisms that ensured future conflict. What emerged in 1918 was not peace, but an unfinished war, frozen in place by financial pressure, ideological manipulation, and deliberate political choices. This is not the end of World War I, this is its transformation. Part 1. Russia. Revolution as Strategic Outcome. Chapters 30 and 31 deal with Russia, and they demolish the comforting myth that the Bolshevik Revolution was simply an internal Russian collapse. Russia did not fall out of the war by accident. By 1917, Russia had been bled white militarily, destabilized economically, politically isolated by its allies, starved of credit, supplies, and diplomatic leverage. The provisional government that replaced the Tsar attempted to continue the war, but it was set up to fail. According to Doherty and McGregor, Western policy towards Russia followed a logic of positive asymmetry. A weak Russia was tolerable, a revolutionary Russia was dangerous, but a revived, coherent Eurasian power was existentially threatening. That mattered more than ideology. A Bolshevik Russia could be isolated, sanctioned, demonized, and used as a long-term enemy. A restored Russia, nationalist, sovereign, industrial, could not. So when the Bolsheviks seized power and sued for peace, Western outrage was selective, condemnation was loud, but intervention was half-hearted, disorganized, and ultimately abandoned. The whites were fragmented, unsupported, and diplomatically undermined. The Reds were contained but allowed to consolidate. This was not incompetence, it was calculation. A revolutionary Russia was dangerous. A coherent Eurasian Russia was worse. Part 2. The Myth of Peace. Versailles as Continuation of War. Chapter 32 turns to Versailles, often described as a tragic but sincere attempt at peace. Prolonging the Agony argues something more damning. Versailles was not designated to reconcile Europe. It was designed to lock in wartime power relationships. Germany was not defeated into peace, it was punished into dependency. The treaty stripped Germany of territory, dismantled its economy, imposed reparations it could not realistically pay, fractured Central Europe into weak, unstable states. At the same time, Britain maintained the naval blockade long after the armistice. This is crucial. Food shortages, civilian deaths, and economic collapse continued after the war had been officially ended. Peace was proclaimed while pressure remained. This reveals the truth. Peace was conditional. Germany was not meant to recover as an equal participant in Europe. It was meant to remain manageable. The war aim quietly shifted. Not victory, not reconciliation, but structural dominance. Versailles did not resolve tensions, it institutionalized them. Part 3. Blockade, Betrayal, and the Moral Collapse of Peace. The continuation of the blockade after 1918 exposes the moral bankruptcy of the settlement. Millions of civilians were still suffering, not because war continued, but because peace was weaponized. Promises made, self-determination, national sovereignty, economic recovery. Promises broken, borders drawn for power, not people. Small states left economically unviable. Germany and Russia excluded from genuine reconstruction. This is where Prolonging the Agony makes its most important point. The war had taught elites that pressure works better than resolution. Blockades, sanctions, financial leverage, and political isolation had proven effective during wartime. They were simply repurposed for peace. Peace became war by other means. And once that logic is accepted, conflict no longer needs to end. Part 4. Why the next war was inevitable. By early 1920s, Europe had a humiliated Germany, a revolutionary but isolated Russia, unstable new states, unresolved debts, and a global financial system tied to wartime obligations. The system required enforcement, pressure, and permanent management. This was not a peace built for endurance. It was a peace built for containment. The book's final insight is devastatingly simple. A war prolonged to exhaustion cannot be resolved by punishment without guaranteeing its return. The grievances of 1919 became the fuel of the 1930s. World War II was not a failure of peace. It was the logical sequel to an unfinished war. So what does Prolonging the Agony ultimately argue? That World War I did not end in 1918, did not resolve its causes, and did not restore balance. Instead, it created permanent enemies, permanent management, and permanent instability. The Russian Revolution, the Versailles Treaty, and the post-war blockade were not isolated tragedies. They were components of a single system, one that replaced resolution with control. World War I did not end, it evolved. And once war becomes a method of organization rather than a means of resolution, peace itself becomes just another phase of conflict. World War I was not concluded by peace. It was suspended and resumed 20 years later. Thank you for listening. Please leave a like and subscribe.